Hello and welcome back to the 7th episode of the Automated Special series that is focusing on SAP automation and integration with Power Automate. So in this episode, I'll show you how you can build an SAP GUI-based automation through pure no-code and low-code capabilities found in Power Automate Desktop. So here we are back in the Power Automate Desktop console, where we see a list of boilerplates I had defined to kickstart specific SAP automation techniques to reuse those components and those desktop flows for following SAP automations. So in the last episode, we have reviewed the no-code options. Today we're going to look into the low-code options for SAP GUI-based automation. So the first thing I'll do before I override that template, I will go here and say Save As and give it a meaningful name. Now, similar to the no-code option, I have here an exception block, and within that exception block I'm calling different subflows which do a specific task like logging on, main processing, and then logging off. And here I have just reused whatever we have recorded in the previous episode, and the same goes for the log off as well. So if you would like to know how we did that, go ahead and visit the 6th episode of the Automated Special series. This episode goes now a step further, not only using no-code but also low-code capabilities for SAP GUI-based automation in Power Automate Desktop, and for that we will also leverage a more complex use case, the one which has been used throughout the Automated Special series, purchase requisitions. So in order to avoid going through Power Apps and Microsoft Dataverse, I have simplified the data ingestion process through this Excel spreadsheet. This is also a very frequent use case that you have to collect information from an Excel spreadsheet and then feed that into an SAP system, or for reconciliation purposes, again, synchronizing to Excel spreadsheet and then doing some checks on the SAP side as well. So this is the Contoso purchase requisition form with a header node, some categorizations which are required by SAP. And here, of course, most importantly, the material to be procured with quantity and unit of measure. So we'll be loading this into memory in Power Automate Desktop and then process each row individually through low-code techniques in Power Automate Desktop and transfer those in an SAP system. So as a first step, we create a new subflow that will process the Excel spreadsheet. And here we start with the Excel commands, launch Excel, opening our purchase requisition document. We can either navigate there through that button, or we can also paste the link directly here in that field. And we can keep the instance visible because we are currently in development mode, so we see also what's happening as the execution runs. Good. So we save. The next thing would be to create a action which is called get first free column and first free row. This will read the contents, the whole contents we have in there, and points me to the first free column and first free row in this Excel spreadsheet. So let me show you the Excel, that we know what we're talking about. So here we have the first free column, which will be column F, and the first free row will be row number 12. Okay? So this will be then automatically loaded into that into these two variables. So let's save. The next step will be to read the purchase requisition header information. Let me go back to the Excel. So that information here with the requester, delivery date category, and so on. So let me select here values of a range of cells, of course. We start at column B and row 3. And we go to column E and row 7, and I show you why. So here is B3, which is the header node, and here is E7. So that whole range of cells I would like to bring into memory. Then I rename this. This is then my purchase requisition header. And I do the same thing now for the purchase requisition lines. Here again, range of cells, this time starting at B10. And now we can use our dynamic variables, which are the first free column, first free row, in order to point to the right row and columns, because it might be that I have 5 or 10 or 20 lines. So this will be then dynamically selecting the full table depending on the amount of purchase requisition lines I have in there. Alright, so let's go to the first free row, first free column. Here you go. So now I want to get the first free column -1, because if we go back to the Excel sheet, this is the column I would like to stop, right? So this is the first free column, and I would like to go up to this one here. So I can then select this one, and I also don't want to go to the first free row. I want to go to the first free row -1. So this will be then this whole table here. Okay, so let's do here the same for the rows. First free row -1. And we save it in a variable called purchase requisition lines. That looks great. Now, if we look back to our Excel, I would like to capture all those fields here and bring them within that table range we have specified. I would like to extract now those individual cell values into respective variables. So I can do that here under variables, set variable. I call this header text or header node. And then here my variable, which was purchase requisition headers. The first row, which is 0 based, and then the second column, which is also 0 based. So I need to do here 0 is the first row, and 1 would be 0 and 1. So this is the second column. Okay, and I can repeat this for the others as well. So let me paste that. You see we have material group, cost center, plant and office, all following the same procedure like I did now with the purchase requisition header and the header node. Okay, so if we go back, here's the header node. If I put this on the top, then we have the correct sequence. Alright, so after this has been launched and the data has been read, I can already close that Excel sheet. And for that we can use the close Excel action, drag and drop it here. It has already pre-filled our Excel instance, and I don't need to save the document because I didn't intend to change anything anyway. Alright. So now let me close the Excel spreadsheet. And we can start testing by right-clicking here and run from here. And you see on the right hand side it's already filling the variables, and as expected we have 12 rows. So the 12th row is the first empty one, and we have 6 columns where the 5th one is the last filled one. Okay, so and if I also look here in my purchase requisition header and lines, let's start with the lines, and you will see a data table which is exactly what we were looking for. Our material, then here the short description, we have the quantity and the unit, and if you look at the purchase requisition header, this should be looking similar, right? Where we have here the labels, and here is really the values. So Victoria, D01 consume, and here as well. Perfect. So this has worked. Now what we have to do is to go to our main flow and add this Excel processing subflow as part of the processing steps here. So let me copy and paste, Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V, and then select the right subflow. So let's run that. The first step is opening SAP, providing the credentials, and then it opens the Excel spreadsheet, reads that data, and continues by closing SAP again, and all the dialogues. Perfect. So this has worked, and here we have again the correct variables in memory. Good. So the next step then is to do our processing, our low-code processing of the UI element in SAP. For that, let me open SAP so we can capture the controls. Okay, so here we go. Let me also open the transaction for purchase requisitions. Perfect. And then we head over to our UI elements, and then we say add UI element here. And then we start capturing. First we need the header node, so the left control on your keyboard with a left click on your mouse. You see, here's the control. Then we will capture this one, the material, then the quantity, unit, delivery date category, delivery date, material group, plant, purchaser group, and requisitioner. Now I will, for demonstration purposes, also capture a control from the second row to show you in a second the dynamic UI elements of that SAP purchase requisition form and the special handling we need to apply to that. So let me just capture the account assignment category of the second row. Okay, so let me simulate also a new purchase requisition just to get additional controls on the lower part. So here we need K, let's say office chair, quantity 1, unit each, D, then press enter. So this will open the item detail section, and from here we need the cost center as well. So let's capture this. And here you see the internal name is something in German. I think this stands for Kostenstelle. And we say done. Now, let's rename that. It's always a best practice. So later in your script you will not be able to identify them if you don't name them properly, of course. So let's rename by pressing F2, or if you click here or right click and then rename UI element. So this is our header node, the account assignment category. And this is our account assignment category of the second row. Let's rename this. Account assign category row 2. Let me also drag and drop this up. So we have it here. And the last one was the cost center. Okay, so let me show you the differences between the first row and the second row onwards. So if I double click on one of these UI elements, you will see the selectors of that UI element. And if you double click again, or here edit, in these three dots and then edit, you see the selector builder, which shows you the path of that UI element and how it can be reached by Power Automate Desktop. So you might notice here there is a number at the end, which is 0013. Here as well, and all subsequent, all child nodes here, they will have also this 0013 as a prefix. Now let's look at the second control on the second row. Again, double click, and here double click. Let me open the selection builder, the selector builder. So in here you notice, previously it was 0013, and here it's all of a sudden 0020. And this is because the UI elements on that screen, they are dynamic from the second row onwards. So we need to handle, in order to reach that control on the second row, we need to do something special here in order to be able to identify that from a Power Automate Desktop side. Okay, but more to this later. Now let's go back to the purchase requisition form and also capture two other controls which will allow us to save and then exit. So here we need the save button. We add that UI element, the save, and we need then also the exit button. So here the 11 was the save button. Let's rename that. Save purchase requisition, and this one is exit purchase requisition. Great, so these are all the controls we need in order to create our purchase requisition automatically through the low-code options here in Power Automate Desktop. Now, as a first step, you remember we have here the Excel processing, doing something on the header side, setting all these variables from the header section, and then we have also a purchase requisition line section which we will need here in our processing part to iterate over. Before we do that, we have of course to reach to that form, so we need to provide the transaction code, we need to hit enter on that green checkbox, and then we have to wait until the form loads, and once it is loaded, then we can start populating that purchase requisition form. So the first thing we would need is a populate text field in window. And here we can now select our transaction code. and provide the transaction code ME51N. So this is hard-coded here because this won't change in the SAP system. Now the next step would be to click that green check mark. Let me get out here. So here we provide the transaction code, and then we would like to click on that enter button here. So this is what we are going to do. We say click UI element in window, and then we point to our go button. That looks good, and then save. So this might take a couple of seconds until that form loads. Let me show you that. Once I specify and I hit enter, you will notice it might take a second or two in order to open that screen. So we would like to wait for this element to appear before we continue that flow. Let's go back. And then we have a wait function here. Wait for window content, and here we can then point to our purchase requisition header. We have that here, the header node, and then select. In case this takes longer, let's say 20 seconds because there's something wrong, you can always fail with a timeout error here as well. Good, actually let's do that. In case it doesn't load in 30 seconds, then abandon the whole flow. Okay, so the next step will be to click on that header node so that we can paste or send some keys to that field to enter some text. So for that we have UI automation, and then click UI element in window, or of course you can also use the search action box here. So click UI element in window, and this time we again select the header node with a left click. Now we're using the send keys, and point to our variable which we have extracted from our Excel spreadsheet. This was the header node. Press OK. And since we don't have a variable for the delivery date, we can build that dynamically. We can say, okay, the delivery date should always be today plus 30 days. In order to do that, we can use get current date time action. We leave it as default, my time zone of my machine, and the variable produced will be current date time. So then the next step would be to, if you go to the date time section here, we can add to date time. We select our date time variable. We will be adding 30 days. And this will be then the delivery date. Okay. We can also set here on the current date time that it should only be the date. So that's fine with us because we don't care about the time section of that current date time variable. Then we add the 30 days. And then we also format that string to match to the format SAP expects in your system. In my case, it's a German format, days dot month dot. So here we can use a convert datetime to text, our delivery date. We will not use the standard, we will use a custom one. And here's a DDMMYYYY. And the variable produced should be again our delivery date. So we are overwriting this. Okay, that looks good. Now the next part will be to do our looping over the purchase requisition lines. For that we can use a for each under loops. For each. And here we will point to our purchase requisition lines. Here you go. And for each row we find in that purchase requisition lines, this will be saved in the current item variable. Now, in order to do our dynamic selectors later on and to make sure we are, to check if we are in the first or in the second row, we also need an index, a row index, an iteration index for that for each loop here. So this we can do with set variable. We can call this purchase requisition row index. And we set it to 0 because this is also again 0 based. Now within that loop we have to increase that variable after each iteration to have the correct index in memory. Row index. And then we increment by 1. So the most important point why we need this purchase requisition row index is again because the UI of SAP if for the purchase requisition is dynamic, and let me explain you why. Let's open again the second account assignment category. We open the selector. So this is the first part we have to deal with in our desktop flow. Make sure after the second row and onwards, it's always pointing to this 0020 in my case. There's a second component which we need to make dynamic, and this is the row index. So that control has been selected in the second row. That's why it is also stating here row underscore 1. It is 0 based, so it's the second row. And this we have to change from name to row, and not hard coding. So every second row and onwards should always include a proper row index. And for that we have this purchase requisition row index, which is defined as a variable, and we can replace this hard coded string here with that variable. So let me go to custom. Let me go to that part here, which says 1. I delete it, and then I open up my variables, and here I should see my purchase requisition row index. Here you go. And this has replaced now that hard-coded value with our row index. So whenever we increase, we loop through or we iterate through our purchase requisition line data table. It will increase that and then replace this variable placeholder here with the actual value of the row index. Okay. Great. So let's test this by just presenting some values as a display message to make sure our loop works properly. So display message, and here we can now output from the current item, let's say value number 0, then we copy that, 1 and 2. Then we save this as well, and let's also output the delivery date. So we see the formatting. Great. Make sure your SAP system is closed. We will be running this from the beginning again. Now it opens SAP, has provided the transaction code. We'll set our header node coming from the Excel spreadsheet this time. And here we see the 3 values of each row. So this is the material name, quantity, and also our delivery date we have added at the end. For the second row, it is the office chair, quantity 1, and you will notice this second one, so current item in brackets 1 is empty because we didn't provide in that Excel sheet any short description. Okay, so this has worked, and the idea would that be that instead of outputting this, of course, as a message box, to enter those records in the respective fields in that grid in the purchase requisition form. So let's do that now. We can remove this. Let's open SAP again. So the first thing we need to handle is the account assignment category, which on the second row, actually all controls on the second row onwards have this 0020 in my case, or 13, might be 15, whatever it is in your instance, always reflecting this then on the second row onwards. So in order to do that, we have to have a marker here which indicates if this is the first run or the second run. We can do this by checking the row index. So let's bring in a if statement. We have if and else and if, else if. So let me go here to if. If the row index, purchase requisition row index is equal to 0, that means it's the first iteration. Then click on the first UI element, this one here. If you recall, this was holding the 0013 at the end. So if this is the second onwards, so row index 1 and onwards, then we would like to go in an else statement. So for that we can search for else, and here put this between the if and end. Alright, so what do we want to do is click on the UI element to activate that specific cell. So we take this, click UI element, and then select the first one. And if it is the second iteration, then we would like to go here, Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V, just to copy that action, and then we can drag it here into this else section and assign it to the second control. Okay. Here we have dealt with that we have positioned the controls on the correct row with the correct selector. Now for the rest of the fields in that row, we will just navigate through tapping through those controls and then writing to that cell through the send keys command. Let me start with a short wait of a second to make sure it's positioned properly. Wait of 1 second. And then we start with our first send keys. And here this will be the account assignment category we have pulled from our Excel sheet. So account assignment category, the value is always the same because this is part of our header and this doesn't change for the other rows in our case. Okay, then we can say save. Then we go to the next field in that. Let me go to the purchase requisition form so I can show you that. So we are then here in that field in the account assignment category, and then from here we would like to do 2 tabs into the material section. We could use 2 single statements, which is then again send keys. Here are insert special keys. We could then use that under the miscellaneous with tab, or you can also type it. And then we would have, you can have a second action which does this again, send keys and tab, or there's a shortcut where you can use that tab and then colon, and then the number of tabs you would like to have here. In our case, 2. And since this would tab now 2 times, make sure you have some, maybe a second in between those keystrokes, or 500 milliseconds or 100, whatever works for you, to make sure that it has enough time to go from one column to the next one. Okay, so that looks good. Then we are now in our material. So we can send another key, this time with the material text. And this is coming now from our current row, right? So the current item is holding that specific material text, and this is in our column 0. This was the first, if you recall, let me open that Excel sheet. So this is the section we have captured as part of that data table, and this would be then row 0 and column 0 as well. So this is our current item currently in column 0. Then we have to tab again. So 1, 2 to the quantity. We can select this, Control C, Control V, and drag it over where we need it to be placed. Okay. Then another key, send keys. This time with a quantity. Here again our current item. The 0 base, the first, so 0 was the material, then we had a short description which would have been 1, and 2 is then our third column holding the quantity. Okay, let me do that for the rest of the fields and then we'll review if we've forgotten something. Okay. We have the first tab. Let me open the SAP UI. So we start with the assignment category, then we tab 1, 2, we are in material, that's the material here. Then another 2 tabs, 1, 2, we are in the quantity, that's the quantity field. Another tab for the unit of measure. Then we have the delivery date category, correct, after 1 tab, another 1 tab with the delivery date, another tab, material group, another tab with the plant. And then 2 tabs, 1, 2 for the purchaser group, yes, another tab for the requisitioner, and then we hit enter, correct, this will then bring up the lower part, and that looks good. Okay, so once the lower part is active, then we have also to fill the cost center. Since this might also take a second or 2, we have to make sure that the cost center is loaded, so we also use here the wait for window content. And we have that. Fairly down, close cost center, and once this is available, then we can populate that text field. And there's a difference between these single fields and fields in a grid. That's why you see me using send keys and populate text field as well. So here let's go to the cost center and then select also our cost center value. Okay. And this does in our case 2 iterations because we have 2 purchase requisition lines, and after that has been finished we need to click the UI element to save and also then to exit. Okay, so click UI element, our save button, Now let me copy that and assign the exit button. Okay, save. So let me actually put here a breakpoint and we can run that process through. What is missing still is that we extract that purchase requisition number, which will be visible in the lower status bar of the SAP window. Let's save, and then we can give it a try. Now this enters the transaction code and fills in the field. Now the purchase requisition lines, tapping through the UI, hitting enter. Now we have our wait for element, and now we can populate also the cost center and head over to our second purchase requisition. You have noticed this has moved now to the second row with a different selector, this dynamic selector we have to deal with, but we had this if statement, so every second row and onwards will leverage that new UI selector. Okay, here again, then it goes ahead and saves that record. And so once this is saved, we have our breakpoint. You see there is a purchase requisition number 001 and then 180. So if I double click on that, this will allow me to copy that text. Copy, close that, and let's go back to Power Automate Desktop to our breakpoint. And we can stop the execution, because what we would like to do now is actually leverage that UI state we have with that status bar text to extract that for our desktop flow here. So there is a function which is called get details of UI element in a window. So before we exit, we have to get this, of course. Then we have to select that status bar through an add UI element. And then we can say done. And the attribute value it is producing here, we can also influence this, and we can say this is the status bar. And then this is important now, because if you recall, so the text we had copied is including text and then a number. We only want to have that number, but this changes every time, so we can of course not hard code it. In order to do that, there is an option to leverage regular expressions. And let me first show you what regular expressions are. And this is really a very, very nice way to do text parsing and to have some kind of dynamic processing for string manipulations and so on. So to showcase that, let's head over to a website. Here you go. So there are different websites, of course, available, and also tooling. So this is one you could use here. Let me paste our string. So in order to identify a integer, more than one integer within a string, you could use something which is looking like this. So backslash and then D. This will identify, okay, these are single digits, and then plus will give you one match. So this whole string here is identifying. If this is now 181 or 182, you see it's always matching. So that's the regular expression we would need in order to parse that string and to extract dynamically this value here. Okay, so we can use that. Let's go back to our Power Automate Desktop and look for a Parse Text function. And here we have the get details of UI element. You recall this was our status bar text. And the text to find should be a regular expression. So again, our backslash D plus starting position 0, and this will produce a match, or in our case, our purchase requisition number, which we can assign to our output variable here, which is the O_processing result. Looks good. And then we can exit the UI. So let me save this again. And this time we can run the whole script not in debugging here, but from the console, which is much faster and will give us also a nice message box at the end once this has been done. Let's make again sure that all the SAP UI is closed. You have saved your flow, and then we can go back to the console. This will download the script from the cloud. Give me an opportunity to change the input variables here for the SAP connectivity, and then I can press enter. Opening SAP, opening the Excel sheet, read the data, close it again, and then start processing our purchase requisition. And then hitting save. You see that purchase requisition number, and now this was the 181. And that's it. You've just created with the low-code techniques some pretty advanced processing flows, which was leveraging Excel processing, for each loops, indexing, custom selectors, dynamic selectors, and UI elements, up to a regular expression to extract information from the SAP GUI window. So in the next episode, we will do a similar approach, but this time using Pro Code technique, where we don't have to use all these selectors and send keys and collections of UI elements. It's a much leaner process, but of course requiring a Pro Code approach.